Your big buddies on tour were Jack Newton, Bob Shearer, Ian Stanley, who funny enough, gave you that kiss, you remember? At,
yes, that was one of his tricks. Ian Stanley was to come up behind you, tap you on your shoulder, and when you went like that, he'd give you mouth to mouth. He was Stan the Man he was crazy. I'm trying to think of a Stan the Man story. The one time we were at the airport in Germany, and they had these two cops came wandering past the line. We were going through the immigration there with their white lanyards, and the white belt, and the next thing, Stanley's got the one guy's gun in his hand. He's just gone to the holster and whipped the gun out. Now the other fella is now scrabbling around like that to get his gun out. He's going to shoot Stan, and he handed it back. They wanted to take him away, but we kind of calmed him down and said, look, he's only an idiot. Anyway, that kind of a bloody story, well, Stanley. But
how about Jack Newton?
Newt, I love Jack Newton. He was what they call how do we put this nicely? A woman magnet. I loved him to bits, the way he spoke and the way he looked, and he wasn't frightened in coming forward. But Newt and I had a lot of pots together, a lot of pots. And he could play too, Newt. He nearly won the British Open, and unfortunately he walked into an aeroplane and it cut him in half, so he's still around drinking, I can tell you that.
And then, of course, we had Cold Castle Classens.
Yeah, well, you could write a book about Tertiary Boy. I used to room with him and Newt quite a lot. And Classens he used to read books. His favourite was Louis L'Amour, the old cowboy books. And I noticed one day that every time he finished reading a page, he'd tear it out and throw it on the ground. So I said to him, Tertiary, what are you doing? Tearing the thing out. He said, no, that's how he keeps his place, because he finds that he gets so drunk. When he started his book again, he had to kind of start reading too early. He'd said, I've read this before, so I'm going to keep going. So he just tore the page out, and he knew where he was. Yeah.
He read a paper the same way?
Well, probably, I don't know. You can look at the pictures in the paper, probably. Dirty boy. He used to come home at 4 in the morning when he was off at 6, say, in the morning, and he'd drink 4 or 5 bottles of water out of the fridge. He'd fall like that. I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, if he drinks that, his bladder will wake him up before 6 o'clock. So that was his alarm clock. He used to just drink 6 gallons of water.
And then, of course, there were the other South Africans, Peter Makovich, Moose Gammon. And Moose watches your success like a hawk, eh?
Well, it seems to. I mean, at one stage he knew exactly how much money I had at the bank. I didn't know how much money I had at the bank, but he did. He obviously looked at what were the prize money and say, look, you've made so much. I said, oh, have I? And he's always on to me about how much money. And Bland, he used to look at Bland's bank account as well.
Vin Baker.
Yeah, Vinny. Got in a lot of trouble with Vinny. Vinny Baker stories. One in Sicily where he won the tournament. I remember this. And we went to a disco afterwards. And there was a spiral staircase up to where the disc jockey was sitting. And of course, Baker, after he had a couple of pots, he came second, by the way, if you remember correctly. So he was in full flight. Anyway, went up this spiral staircase, which is in the middle of the dance floor. Of course, filled his mouth with beer and spat on the people down, pretended he'd hit some poor girl right in the chest. So there was anger with all these Sicilian guys. Anyway, we calmed that down and bugged me if he didn't go and do it again. So there was really a rort on. So we took him away, and eventually we ended up in a pizza place, because we had a few guys protecting him, because these are Sicilians, the mafioso blokes, they will fix you. So anyway, we were on halfway home. Where's Baker? And he disappeared, and we saw him going to this pizza place. And there, all the guys were in there. All these Sicilians that were trying to kill us were in there. So anyway, we sat down to have a pizza with Baker, and they started to throw bits of pizza onto our table. So Bake picks up his whole pizza like that, and he just has a go at these blokes sitting down there, and he sprayed them. He hit everyone from there to there in a half moon. So of course now there's a rort. Anyway, the same story. We got him out of there and we walked into the hotel. And halfway through, I noticed there were people running up the street on the other side. They'd obviously set an ambush over that side. And they tried to cut us off at the pass. And of course, the only guy they caught was me. Baker was in the hotel by that time. But anyway, when he saw that they'd got me, out he comes roaring, "Whoa!" like this, on his own against 30 of these blokes. Anyway, I do remember him having the first guy arrived, and Baker tried to give him a kick. He tried to kick this guy, and his shoe flew into the air, and then they were on him. And of course, he was very lucky actually, because they lobbed him into a culvert on the side of the road, so they could only get at him one at a time. Anyway, eventually someone yelled, "Here come the police," or something, and everyone bolted, and we got him out of there and took him away. But he had a twin personality, Baker. And in the morning he said, "Baker, what are you doing?" He said, "That wasn't me, it was Vernon, not Vinny." It was Vernon. He used to have a brother called Vernon who caused all the trouble.
Then there was a tournament that I think most older people remember. That was the Trust Bank Tournament of Champions. That was at Kensington, where you walked through the water.
Ah, yeah, you mean the last shot when the ball bounced out of the water? Yeah. What happened was I needed 6 at the last hole to win from Jack Ferencz. And I played with Warren Humphreys, I think, and the American chap, was it King, not King? Anyway, it doesn't matter. He'd hit it under the television screen on the right-hand side. Warren had. And so they were arguing about a thing, and I was dying to hit my second shot. So eventually I went out of turn, and I don't know what happened. Because I almost aimed at the clubhouse, and it squirted out low right, and anyway hit the water and bounced out and ran up 10 foot away from the hole, where I could comfortably two-putt. But then it was such a lucky thing that I took my shoes and socks off and then walked through the water. And actually, I nearly, it was a cock-up because I slipped, it was a slimy as hell underneath there. And I was walking straight to my ball, it got deeper and deeper and deeper, so I had to get out the side. Anyway, that was a good break.
And everybody remembers it. I mean, how many people have come up to you?
Everywhere I go, they all say, "Yeah, you remember that time we walked through the water at Kensington?" All over the place, Namibia or wherever. I mean, wherever I've been there, they always mention that.
The other thing that really irritated you was slow play.
The slow players, that Kenny Brown was a dead stop. I mean, I actually turned him in one day when I arrived at the course at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "I'm turning Kenny Brown in for slow play." But they said, "He hasn't even gone off yet." I said, "Yeah, I know, but you've got to get 2 warnings. And if you go out and give him a warning when he arrives, at least you can start finding him earlier on." He was pitiful. And of course, Tony Johnson, he was another one. I didn't mind playing with him because you could actually keep up with what he was doing. But if you played in front, I mean, you kept, taking a step, and he'd go back and look at his yardage book. He used to drive me insane as well.
But you and Tony Johnson were big buddies.
Tony Johnson are great mates. Yeah, I like his sense of humour, and he's a solid citizen. He's a good guy.
From the old days, the 70s. There was another player, Kobie de Grancy.
He was another slow one, and I think you had him on a program. He said he actually did it on purpose. He said it used to mess the blokes up behind. And old Kobie, I remember him one day, he pegged his ball up, he took so long to hit the ball. I said to him, "Kobie, you better hit that quickly before the termites get your peg." Kobie, he's very deliberate, yeah.
Tell us a story about Tony Johnson and the shadow.
With Johnson, yeah, that was at Palabora. There was cloudy kind of a day with these big thick clouds. And of course he had this 4-foot putt or whatever it was. And I was standing there throwing my ball in the air, waiting for him to putt. Normally he was walking around and touching doing this scrabbling, scratching around the place. And during that time the cloud went over past the sun and my shadow appeared right behind him while he was over the ball. So he said to me, "Sam, do you mind moving your shadow?" And I said, "Well, when you started putting, my shadow was over there."
Nerves. You were very, very nervous on the golf course, and I think that would be a surprise to a lot of people that know you and have seen you play, but you used to get very nervous.
Yeah, before I started, I was always jumpy, because particularly if I was doing well, if I was leading the tournament or something, I was very, very jumpy. And of course it came through with the putter, you know, that's where I was really bad. Anything, I was very jumpy.
And I think the other thing that would surprise a lot of people was how hard you worked on your game.
Yes, people used to think that I used to drink and then just go out and play, but I used to enjoy working, hitting balls, and I worked harder than most. I can tell you.
I mean, when you were getting ready for the senior tour, and you practiced mostly at Wingate Golf Club in Pretoria, they said you practiced for hours and hours on end every single day.
Yeah, I counted. I hit well, to start. I built up to 600 balls a day. And I kept it at that, hitting balls and chipping and stuff like 600 balls a day.
And of course that was all worthwhile when you went over there and you won the US Senior Open.
Yeah, no, it paid off dividends, definitely. I went there, I found a couple of swing thoughts that, you know what it's like sometimes, Hazy, your game isn't quite right, and you go out in the practice tee and you get a couple of swings and you get this a feeling, and it suddenly goes in the slot. But fortunately for me, that stuck right through the two schools and well into the following season, actually, funny enough.
Was that the highlight of your entire career?
Yes, money-wise it was. You know, we worked out that the first year on the senior tour I won more money than I did in my whole career before that. And the thing with that too was they looked after you so well on that tour. You arrived in there; they gave you a brand new car every week to drive you, and you never lacked for balls. They gave you too many gloves, shoes, and any clubs you wanted. You go and take putters and drivers and stuff like that. So we were looked after very, very, very well, I must say, compared to us when we used to play.
David Ledbetter, you knew before you went to play on the tours overseas. You knew from Zimbabwe. And David Ledbetter, he said this, I think, on numerous occasions, that the two golf swings that he uses as examples are yours and Ben Hogan's.
Well, that's put those. I don't mind being bracketed with Ben Hogan, but that's a compliment. That's nice. That's nice to hear.
Do you, when you've seen your swing, do you realise how good a golf swing you have?
Well, it was a repeater, as it wasn't as pretty as, let's say, Bobby Cole's swing, how beautiful his rhythm was and everything like that. But I wouldn't have swapped my swing for any of them. Not for any of them.
And your short game?
Short game, you've been there, as I was right out of the bunkers and I could chip okay, but my putting sometimes went very bad. And the 40-yard pitch, I'd never mastered that. The 40-yarder. I don't know why, but never could.
Why is that? Because you practiced your long game so much. Why didn't you just spend more time on your short game?
Well, I did, but then I seemed to get so wrapped up in it, how I was doing it than what I was trying to do, You think, well, let's take this up a little steeper to get a bit of spin, or let's, And you forgot how far you wanted to hit the damn ball. And that's what I found. I got too wrapped up in the mechanics of the bloody game instead of just using feel like I did with my other game, with the driver or the 3 irons and the 7 irons. It was all feel. Whereas with those field shots, I was trying to go mechanical. I think that's what my problem was.
Caddies, and you've had some fun with caddies over the years. Let's start off with the caddy that you had at the French Open.
Well, the French Open chap, this was in my first year out, so this is 1969 or 70. Saint Nombre Bitesh. I got a nice young caddy, he was there, and I shot 78 in the first round. And the next day he dropped me. So now I'm waiting around, I'm now nearly last off. And here sitting in the side is this crew-cut bloke, he looked like a policeman, but a big, strong chap. And I had this big Zambian Airways bag. And he said, he'll caddy for me. So I said, fine. Now he took the bag like you take a beer mug. He didn't put it over his shoulder, he grabbed it by the handle. That's how he walked around the whole day. So he wanted to club, he says, yeah, let's take it out of that, and away you go. Anyway, I'm trying to make the cut, and I get to the 8th hole, it's a long par 4 anyway. At 3 tiers, and the pin was on the back, and I hit it 8 foot short of the pin up there, and I thought, oh, another birdie, because I'd made 2 already. I'm going to make another birdie. And it was his turn to take the pin. And he had the bag in that hand, and the pin in this hand. So anyway, he stood quite close, and I said to him, just get out of me. Anyway, he moved away a little bit. Anyway, I hit the putt and it horseshoed out. So I went into my histrionics, you know, you turn your back and you do all, you know, all that stuff. And the next thing I hear this click. Sounds very, very similar to an oak kicking the ball. So anyway, I looked around and here comes the ball. He kicked it back to me. See, on the putting green, before we went out, he was kicking the ball back. So he thought I was going to have it over, and he just kicked it back. And he kicked it down these 3 tiers, like 30 yards off the front of the green. It took me 4 to get up from there. Anyway, I was going to hit him with the putter, and he had the pin in the bag in that hand and the pin in this hand. And I was going to hit him in the temple with the putter like that. And I thought, no, well, if I miss him, this guy is so strong, you know, from holding the bag like that, he'd kill me. So anyway, that was I missed the cut comfortably there, but that was.
How about the time playing with Ray Floyd when you were convinced your caddy was giving you the wrong yardages?
Yeah, well, he did. Actually, that's my mate Paul Blanks. He was a bloody good caddy, in fact. But he'd obviously added on instead of taken off instead of adding on, and he was 20 out. So anyway, I had a 9-iron, and it finished in the bunker in front of the pin. And anyway, we walked up to Ray Floyd's ball, and he played. And I shouted to him, Ray, what is the yardage there? And he said, I had 110. And then I said, I'm sorry, Ray, but I just played out a turn. Yeah. But I had another caddy I got to tell you about, Hazy, that went with the hair. The same thing happened there. I was first off in the morning, I think, or second off in the morning. And my caddy didn't pitch again. So I took a cart and I went down the first there, it's a par 5, with a big swale in it, like that. Early in the morning, there's dew everywhere. And as I got to the top of the hill, they shouted from the pro shop, which was halfway just off the tee on the left-hand side, if you remember correctly, that there was a caddy. So anyway, they sent this caddy and he arrived, but he had long hair down to here. Each hair was about that thick, it was so dirty, but an earring, which in those days, you know, earring was very suspect. And I said to him, you're right, you know, because he didn't look too good, but he looked him in the eye. He said, no, I'm fine. You know, his eyes were fine. I said, well, just leave the cart there. They'll come and fetch it. Take it thing off the bag, because I'd hit my second shot already. Anyway, I got halfway up the bank towards the thing, and this clattering started at the back. He'd fallen over, and he was sliding down that hill, 20 yards down to the bottom of the hill there. And anyway, I thought, oh, he just slipped, you know. Anyway, the second hole is like downhill 3-par, little 3-par like that. We hit our shots, went off, and here he came, straight down again. Down he went again, face first in the sand now. Now he's got sand in his eyebrows and his hair and everything like that. So we thought, oh, he slipped again. The third hole's uphill, so he was all right. The fourth hole, that's par 5, I drew it over that road. There's a road in there. And he and I were walking together. It's a gentle downslope like that. When we got to my ball, he never stopped. He just kept walking. Because he had no brakes, this oak. And eventually I realized that downhill this oak was no good. So anyway, we went around. I think he fell down another 4 or 5 times on the way around. But we got to 17. I had a bad drive, chipped it out, and then I hit an 8-iron stiff like that. So he and I went up to the green. And I told him, I said, now listen here, do me a favor. Whatever you do, because he's going to take the pin. I said, don't come over the back of that green. It's 45-degree angle for 30 yards. You are going to kill yourself. Go around the front and get on the tarmac and walk nicely. Anyway, sure enough, we go over the top and we get to the bottom, and here he comes. We can start rattling. Anyway, he was coming down. The hair was pinned back, like his eyes were that size. And halfway down, he was doing 60 miles an hour, this house, with the bag. And every time his foot went in, the clubs would give him a crack on the back of the head. So now he's still got the pin in his hand. So now, to stop himself, he was going to do like a pole vault. Anyway, he broke the pin. And he had actually blood pumping out of his head like this. Anyway, someone put the pin back in. And afterwards, we were sitting in the bar. Everyone was saying, hell, we overshot that 70, because they didn't have the yardages in those days. Everyone was hitting it over the back, because the pin is only that high, see. So that looked far. So everyone was hitting it over the back of the green. But those are the 2 worst caddies I had. The rest have been fun. And I've had 2 great caddies. Paul Blanks was a good caddy, one on the seniors, and a fellow called Woody, who caddied for me in Europe. Very, very good caddies, yeah.
Well, Simon Hobde was always one of the funniest, most amusing people to play with. On many occasions we were out duelling on the European Tour. One of my most memorable moments, I was playing in front of him. I was always known as a bit of a slow player. I remember on a par 5 he came wandering all the way down the fairway. I was on the green after hitting 3 shots. He walked all the way down the fairway, waiting for the green to clear, and he said to me, "Ken, if you don't get a move on, I'm going to stick a bit of dynamite up your up." And he was like that, Simon. He didn't like being held up. He was a quick player, and if anyone got in his way, he let them know. And Simon was one of the characters of the game of golf. Many amusing time has been had with him, and we loved him.